I'm the old one, I guess. I didn't want a mic because I need this to hold on to. I'm not going to move like Eddie does, going from side to side, although I like that because oftentimes sitting back in the back in the Baptist pews, there'll be somebody real tall right in front of me, and I can't see. So if you move over here, I can see you. If you move over there, I can see you. But I like that. But I can't. I've got to hold on to something. I have a story that's more than racing, but that's where it all started. I'm going to try not to bore all of you ladies. Of course, Diane, I think, likes racing. I had a cousin that I'd always been close to. Although he was 6 years older than I was, we enjoyed each other from the very beginning. We grew up, worked together at Motorola. We bought houses in the same neighborhood. We rode together to work, and we and our wives went out to eat often and enjoyed many other things, including NASCAR racing. After about 10 years, he left Motorola and went to work for a company that had a contract with Motorola to maintain two-way radio systems for them. After 11 years, I left Motorola to realize a lifelong dream of opening a photography studio. I still love to make pictures, and I'll mention Diane again. If you don't have her book, you need to get it. It's a great book. I'm still enjoying it very much. John had made a deal when he went to work with Diversified Electronics to purchase the company, and after some time, this was accomplished. I left Motorola after 11 years and was enjoying my job of running the studio, and I had an exclusive contract with Mara High School to do all of their students' pictures, about 1,500 students, 500 of which were seniors, and that's good money. One day I got a call from John to see if I could put together a catalog, and I could. He and one of his technicians came over that night, and we shot the pictures. We were there until 2 o'clock in the morning, and bright and early the next morning, I was back in there processing the film. This was before the digital age. Processing the film, putting together the catalog. What was the reason for the rush? Well, a couple of weeks earlier, a NASCAR driver had come into their shop, wanted them to check out their radios. And they found out they all worked well, so they asked to get permission to go into the NASCAR garage to see it in the race car. No one at that time had radios in race cars because it simply would not work. There was too much noise, too much energy in a car. Now you have to realize that they had to do a lot of experimenting, and they figured it out, and they got that system to work. Well, everybody wanted one then, and that's why they had to have a catalog very quickly, because everybody wants to keep from letting anybody get ahead of them. NASCAR asked them to come and go to the races every week. They couldn't do that, but there was enough people asking for radios then that a week or two later, when June and I were at John and Connie's house, he told me he was going to start a racing division of Diversified Electronics and wanted to know if I was interested in coming to work for him. And since we had always been so close, I said yes, I did. And I thought it would be just an ideal job. And So we did. I went to work with him, doing all of the marketing and the selling. We had one technician, so that was the whole company. We did go to 5 races a year, and we could take along one other technician. That was our entire team. We traveled in a small service van, and with 2 technicians cramped in the back, trying to work at a bench, and I was standing with my foot up on a running board, writing job tickets, giving quotes, and doing all the PR work I could. We soon purchased a travel trailer, refurbished it, with benches in the back and an area in the front for people to be able to sit. And we started doing business. And we began traveling to all the NASCAR races. Our first customer to purchase an entire system was Richard Petty and his brother and engine builder Maurice Petty. And we still stay in touch with the Pettys. I do. Dale Earnhardt was another good friend. We kept him, kept his and Dale Jr.'s fire suits in our trailers all the time, and they dressed in there because dressing in their own trailer, they couldn't get out of the fans in front of the trailer. So they just left them in our trailer to get dressed there. We didn't just deal with NASCAR. I have worked the Indy 500 several times, the Pikes Peak Hill Climb, the Formula One Racing, International Motorsports Association, the IHRA drag racing, and I traveled 3 years exclusively with NHRA drag racing. It was always interesting to work the 24-hour race at Daytona, as so many of the drivers would spend time in our trailer. This was before they had motorhomes up. And although I met numerous drivers out there, I didn't really get to know them well except for a few. We never knew who to expect to come into our trailer. But now, for the rest of the story, as they say. In 1999, we learned that John's wife, Connie, had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. 5 weeks later, we lost Connie. After that, John stopped coming into the office very often, and when he did, he would call me into his office for long talks. In those talks, I could tell that he was a changed man, bitter with the world, and dissatisfied with the way everything was going. I did not seem to be able to help him, but I tried to listen. A year after Connie died, John was on a flight to Rome, Italy. He was going to pick up an award from Motorola. That's the #1 dealer in the world. I got a call to come into his son's office. I was told that his dad had said I was no longer vital to the company. I was fired. No reason. But it was a privately owned company, and I feel like he had every right with his privately owned. I was devastated and didn't know where to turn. I called an old friend, and I could have gone to work the next morning with him. But I turned it down because I didn't want to rush into anything. June and I pondered what our next move was and discussed a lot of things, praying a lot, weighing our options. One day I came in and said, let's just move back to South Georgia. And she said, well, let's just do it. We laughed about it. We were both joking. After all, we've been living in Mara for about 40 years, almost 40. It's the only house our son had ever lived in. And we were just joking about it. But for the next few weeks, we did continue to say something about moving back. We hadn't found anything negative about a move back south. So I just said, let's just put the house up for sale, give it 6 months. If it sells, we'll move back to South Georgia. If it doesn't, we'll stay here. And she agreed. I called a realtor that I knew, got the house listed. I asked him how much the closing cost would be. He told me that. I said, add that to this price, and that's what we want. And nothing else. We don't want to take less. Didn't expect a lot because there were a couple of other houses in our subdivision that were up for sale, about the same size house, and had been for 6 or 8 months. But 2 weeks later, I got a call from a realtor, and he said, I have sold your house. We had to find a place to move in a hurry. So, we called a few friends we knew in different towns in South Georgia. We didn't have any particular place that we wanted to go. And nobody knew of a house. But then we called June's aunt and uncle who lived in Ashburn. She just passed away last week too. So, but anyway, we called them, and they knew of a retired Baptist minister and his wife who had a house in Ashburn for rent. So we came down that weekend, looked at the house, and rented it. After we got back home, June and I sat down and talked about what was happening. We both came from Christian families and had always known that God was in charge of our lives. But it really came home to me at that time. Everything that I thought was a total disaster was suddenly a pattern that was falling into place. This problem of mine actually brought some good. For example, my mother was elderly and I needed to be near her the last couple of years of her life. June's mom was going to shortly need more constant care, and June was the one who could be there for her. She passed away in 2012, and for the last 6 or 8 years of her life, June was with her at least 3 times a week, taking her to the doctor, taking her out to eat, taking her to trips on to her home down in Lake Park, and anything else that would improve her final days. She was getting good care in an assisted living home in Tifton, but June brightened her days. There were many things that being in South Georgia were advantageous to us. God has slapped me in the face because that was the only way He knew to get my attention. I realize that now, but looking back, I know that was not so bad. I think of that moment now. I feel we need to especially be in prayer for our community and the situation we're all in, some more than others, because of devastating storms that have come through. We have been touched by the storms. All of us have, not just a few. I know the feeling of helplessness and of hopelessness, and I'm thankful for the prayers that went up for me and the encouragement that I received to keep going. It was difficult, but I had to be reminded that God is still in charge. I feel stronger today because of what happened to me back at that time. As Dr. David Jeremiah wrote in his book, What Are You Afraid Of? He says, and I quote, "Does God allow suffering? Yes, He does. But He never concedes control. He never allows things to happen without purpose. And we can always rest in the knowledge that He is just and compassionate." And he goes on in the same book, speaking of Job, said, Job returned to a place of peace and prosperity because he gained proper perspective of God. He decided to let God be God. After his suffering was over, Job realized his quest had been for the wrong things. He didn't need to know why, he needed to know whom. Instead of getting what he wanted, he got what he needed. deeper vision of God's grace and strength in his life. That was a good lesson for me. What I thought was so bad has truly been a blessing for me. We bought a small house in Rochelle. It's the smallest house June and I have ever lived in. But it's plenty big for both of us. And it has a small yard cut, which I like. We had a large in-ground pool in our yard back in Morrow, Georgia, but we have a large shade tree that I love to sit out under right now. I'm thankful. I'm not trying to impress anyone, and I know I have everything I need. I'm near my family, and although it's not as good as it would be if I were in Pitts, I do have good neighbors. Kind of crazy. He called, Barry Collier. Anyway, I told him I was just trying to improve the neighborhood. I have been more blessed than I deserve with the family that I have. June and I are fortunate to have a son, Kyle, who is married to the girl we would have picked for him had we been given that task. Kyle is an attorney, and I believe he had Judge Rhodes in a continuing education class one time. He's an attorney, and Susan, his wife, teaches AP classes at Stars Mill High School in Peachtree City. Together they have given us Thomas and Elizabeth. At 15, Thomas beats me at golf, just like everybody else. And he was on the Class 5A State Golf Championship team last year as a freshman. Elizabeth is 10 and continues to amaze me with her artistic talents and ability to wrap me around her little finger anytime she wants to. In prior years, I have traveled all over these United States. I used to be in over 30 states every year. I have gone a day early to enjoy things like a baseball game in Candlestick Park in San Francisco. I've been to Mile High Stadium in Denver and Wrigley Field in Chicago. Once when I was working in Sacramento, June went with me, and we went a day early for that. Went down through wine country, Napa and Sonoma, across the Golden Gate Bridge, into San Francisco, down Lombard Street. I always got off and went down Lombard Street because it's the cripplest street in the world. And then we went on to Fisherman's Wharf where we had lunch, but she still wouldn't go to the Alcatraz with me, and I haven't ever seen her. It's right there. June and I have been in fresh snow on top of Pikes Peak on the 4th of July and have seen the sunrise from there. I have seen majestic Mount Rainier as well as Mount St. Helens. I've seen Plymouth Rock. I've seen the Grand Canyon, Meteor Crater, the atomic bomb Ground Zero in New Mexico. And yes, I even stood on a corner in Winslow, Arizona. Such a fine sight to see. And I saw Doc Holliday and the Earp Brothers fight the Clantons in a reenactment at the OK Corral in Tombstone. These are just a few of the things that I have enjoyed in my work and life. I have gone and seen a lot of things. I have friends in all walks of life, and I've met many others that you would recognize if I said their names. I have had a serious presidential candidate in my living room, and have driven him around in my car campaigning. I have been in a police motorcade with the Vice President of the United States. I have traded a bag of Vidalia onions for a bag of Walla Walla onions to a friend in Washington State. I still think Georgia onions are sweeter than Walla Walla. It's been a good life. I'm very fortunate to have so many friends all over the country. And today, after retirement, I have the greatest job in the world. I'm back in my hometown, seeing old friends every day, and it's only for 3 days a week. giving me plenty of time to do the little jobs that June has for me. At this point in my life, I am content and lacking for nothing that is important. And believe me, friends, that's a good feeling. I have very little, but I have everything. I have peace. I have good memories of the past, and at age 75, I have a lot to look forward to. And for the first time in many years, June and I have found a church home we love and are so grateful for every one of you. That includes you, Barbara. I don't dwell on what happened with my cousin John, and although he hasn't asked, I have forgiven him. I saw him recently at a memorial service for a former co-worker. We talked, but the closeness we once had is gone. I look at that situation as one in which he helped me, not one of regret. I have so many more stories about people I have met, some of whom became good friends, but I won't bore you any further. Just let me end this talk by simply saying thank you from the bottom of my heart for letting us be a part of the Union family and for letting me tell my story.
Amen.